Gonna keep on moving forward. Keep on moving forward. Keep on moving forward. Never turning back. Never turning back. Gonna keep on moving forward. Keep on moving forward. Keep on moving forward. Never turning back. Never turning back. Gonna keep on moving forward. Keep on moving forward. Keep on moving forward. Never turning back. Never turning back. Gonna keep on moving proudly. Keep on moving proudly. Keep on moving proudly. Never turning back. Never turning back. Gonna keep on singing loudly. Keep on singing loudly. Keep on singing loudly. Never turning back. Never turning back. Gonna keep on loving boldly. Keep on loving boldly. Keep on loving boldly. Never turning back. Never turning back. Gonna keep on moving forward.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I am your worship associate. My name is Carolyn Kavanagh, and Reverend Anthony has this Sunday off. So welcome to the Sedona Unitarian Universalist Fellowship. We bid you welcome. We do not ask what you believe or expect you to think in a certain way, but only that you try to live a kindly and helpful life with the dignity proper of a human being. Welcome all who believe that religion is wider than any sect and deeper than any set of opinions, and all who might find in our friendship strength and encouragement for daily living. And now I invite you to look at your order of service and say with me the shared affirmation of mission. This fellowship is a welcoming, diverse, and nurturing, beloved community that promotes progressive religious thought and practice to create a more loving, just, and sustainable world. Now it's time for announcements, and I have a couple. And then if you want to say your announcements, raise your hand. Otherwise, I'll say them for you. So my first announcement was something that we put in our newsletter for March. March 31st was the Transgender Day of Visibility. And why is that a landmark? Because as you use, we do affirm the inherent worth and dignity of all people, especially the trans and non-binary, the genderqueer, gender fluid, or intersex people. Our focus should be on the most vulnerable, and it means we care deeply about the trans community, especially children and youth who are being targeted with discriminatory laws that jeopardizes their health and well-being. And then my second announcement is from Michelle Snyder, and May 2nd is the SUUF newsletter deadline. Now the next announcement is from the Widening the Circle Committee, and we had a great discussion on I Am Not Your Negro, a documentary about James Baldwin. And we talked about it last Friday, and there were 15 of us, and it was a great discussion. But you have an opportunity, if you missed it, you can join the Zoom discussion this Tuesday, April 26th at 1 o'clock. And Reverend Anthony will be leading it. And thank you, Pat, for putting it in our weekend announcements that you receive every Saturday. And she said, if you want to join this group, press this blue, this link, makes it real easy, and it will take you to the meeting. And so we invite you to widen our circle by joining us. And then the second announcement from the Widening the Circle group, there will be a gathering of exploring elderhood. It's the first time that they're getting together. And they are going to meet at Suzanne and Ron Berkey's house. It's for Friday, April 29th at 10:30 in the morning. And there will be more details and an email announcement, and it's also on our SUUF website. But I know Pat put it also in our weekend announcements. And if I'm correct, Tanya, they really should RSVP.
You can just tell me after service.
Perfect. So Tanya, raise your hand in case people aren't sure. Tanya is taking our SVP, so it just helps us to know how many people.
How to set it up.
How to set it up. Thank you. Gary, do you want to make your pledge announcement?
Sure.
Okay.
Good morning. I'm Gary. status of the pledge, which is April, but we'll take pledges on May 1st, next Sunday. We'll take pledges all the way through ever. Thank you to everyone that has pledged already. I think we're off to a really good start. And to those that are going to pledge today and this week and in the days to come, we thank you in advance. We have a budget that's been discussed at the board, and we have a level of pledge that we set at $60,000, which is realistic. It's not overstated, it's reasonable, and I can channel Reverend Anthony a little bit. Let's blow through that a little bit if we can. But we're at 40,000 right now, so we've got 20,000 to get to our 60, and then hopefully we'll go well beyond that. Information on how to get a hold of me is on the back of the service, order service, my address, my email. There's pledge forms that Pat has put outside. However you want to communicate, that's fine. And I think at some point, but we just need every member and every friend to consider pledging. And if you don't, you might get an email or a touch on your shoulder. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Gary.
Good morning. I want to remind all the women in the congregation that we are having an in-person lunch gathering this Wednesday at Sedona Golf Resort at noon. We did send out an e-bite, or you can respond to that, get in touch with me. My information is on the website in the weekend's announcement. And if you could respond by Monday evening so that we can give a final head count to the restaurant. But we'll be on the patio at the golf resort. Real nice environment, great menu. See you there.
Thank you. Thanks, Pat.
Good morning. I have an update from the Hope House. The interviewing process is currently underway to select the families who will be the first residents of the Hope House. They are still looking for volunteers in the following areas: caseworkers with qualifications in psychology, counselling or social work, someone to lead the volunteer team working to recruit and place volunteers, someone with a financial background to work with residents on financial planning, and people who could provide relief for Denise, the house manager, to allow her time off on Saturdays. There are various possibilities, doing a 1 8-hour shift, or 2 people sharing and doing 2 4-hour shifts. There would be no overnights, and a background check will be needed and training will be given. If any, I'm thinking of doing it at 4 hours. If anybody would like to pair up with me so that we could operate, it would probably be once every 2 months doing a Saturday. So please let me know.
Thank you, Penny.
The Verde Valley Voices is a community chorus, and they meet in Cottonwood. We have about 50 members, and we have our spring concert coming up. It's not until May 15th. It's a Sunday afternoon at 3, and tickets are $10. I have them if you're interested in going. It meets at the Immaculate Conception Catholic Church. That's where the concert will be. The big church on the way to Cottonwood on the right there. And the acoustics inside are amazing. The chorus sounds great when it rings like that. And we have such a wide variety of songs from Brazil, from Africa, from typical chorale music that you would expect. It's very beautiful and sensitive, and lots of rhythm and fun. So I invite you.
I'm just going to bring this up because a couple of us were there yesterday. Piano on the Rocks
has had a 3-day series of concerts, and their final one's today at 4 o'clock at the Sedona Methodist Church, and there is no charge. And they have really world-class musicians. I mean, really world-class musicians. It's really amazing, and the concert's over 2 hours. So if you've got some time this afternoon, I think we're really blessed to have this opportunity.
What's it called?
Piano on the Rocks.
Piano on the Rocks.
And it's at the Sedona Methodist Church, 4 o'clock.
Thank you.
All right. Our last meeting for University Women will be a week from tomorrow in May 2nd. And on our theme of strong women, we will include portrayals by 4 female community leaders of the Greater Verde Valley of suffragettes who are going to talk about the right to vote. And they're going to portray the following women. Carrie Chapman is going to be played by Janine Trevelyan. Ida B. Wells will be played by Maudel Terry. Alice Paul will be played by Ellen Ferreira. And Frances Munden, Arizona suffragette, will be played by Linda Starr. So that should be a really interesting program. And I believe we may also let you know the scholars that are going to get scholarships from us this year. And the meetings are just at Christ Lutheran, which is on the other side of the fire station from us. And hopefully I'll have the newsletter available. I'll try to see if I can get it to Pat so she can send it. I don't know if she will or not, but then you can read more about it there. So thank you.
What's the date?
It's May 2nd, Monday, a week from tomorrow. 10 o'clock.
It's been a challenge. I'm going to read Living with Pride. It came from our UUA worship web, and it was written by Lori Gorgas-Hallman. We light our chalice flame for those who live their lives in closets of shame, for those who furtively visited the bars where nobody knew your name, for the Stonewall riot, and the fierce trans women who fought, for the plague, which still takes far too many, too young and too soon. So many gone. So many never lived to see out gay kids singing on TV, out gay people serving in the military, marriage equality, families formed by intention. So we light our chalice flame for all these and for all our siblings of the rainbow, surviving, living life out in the open. Amen.
You've got a friend in me. You've got a friend in me. And when the road looks rough ahead and you're miles and miles from your nice warm bed, you just remember what your old pal said, son. You've got a friend.
I'm saying you've got a friend in me. You've got a friend in me.
You've got troubles, I've got them too. There isn't anything I wouldn't do for you. We stick together, we can see it through, 'cause you've got a friend. Wow, wow, wow. Some of the folks might be a little bit smarter than I am, bigger and stronger too, but you really do. But none of them will ever love you the way I do. Just me and you, boy. And as the years go by, our friendship will never die.
today's reading is called Love. The author is named Enfleshed. One name. And this also was from the UUA Worship Web. So I'll begin. Love cannot be bought or sold. It does not make a profit.
Love does not hide from truth.
Love dives deep.
Love takes on flesh.
Love is queer.
Love is platonic.
Love is erotic.
Love is asexual.
Love confronts evil.
Love delights in pleasure.
Love touches and weeps and flirts and feeds and creates.
Love is risky.
Love challenges systematic evil in all its forms.
Love is simple, but not easy.
Love is collective.
Love rises up.
Love apologizes.
Love believes.
Love corrects.
Love holds accountable.
Love pays reparations.
Love heals.
Love tells its story.
Love embraces everyone, every creature, every creation. It knows us intimately. It holds us collectively.
Love transcends every boundary that seeks to confine it. It will not tolerate violence in its name.
It does no harm.
It only sets free. So it is my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker, Jen Emmerich. I met Jen at my first P5 meeting. She was there. She usually was the greeter. And I was very tentative and a little nervous showing up. And I had learned that our son was identifying as female, and it was very confusing. I even went to his adolescent psychologist to get some answers, and there were none. And I started reading. But yeah, as you know, reading can only do so much. So I decided to go to a P5 meeting. And I told a little bit of my story. And who comes up to me with JJ? And it was perfect. And it's helped me so much. And Jen is a trans counselor for parents. And as she said to me in the vestibule, you know, parents need support. Parents need to know they're not going to do it right all the time. I get my son's pronouns mixed up, and because it's a daughter, but unfortunately because the hormones don't work, Allison doesn't present very well. She's really non-binary, right? And so I get confused. She's so accepting though. I'm lucky. And we have a good relationship. But Jen was one of the people that you can tap into when you're just having a rocky time. So thank you, Jen, for saying yes to do this talk. I so appreciate you.
Make sure you can hear me. Thank you for having me. So I am a psychotherapist. One word. Here in the community, I've been here for fall of 2016. I moved here, and JJ is one of my first friends. So I have a private practice in mental health counseling, and one of my specialties is gender identity. And as I was thinking about this talk, I thought, well, when did I learn about gender identity? Let me pose the question to you. When did you learn of the transgender identity? Do you think about how long ago that was, or was it more recent for you? College? Okay. I remember in 1991, A&E produced a documentary called Transgender Revolution, and that's when I was fascinated, not heard before. So a decade later, I'm now learning as much as I can and now practicing in that area. So my talk is gender identity over the decades, so we can start back at the beginning, circa, I guess almost 30 years ago. And the field, from a practitioner point of view, was pretty regimented. We expected people to show up in the gender that they wished to pursue or were declaring. We didn't allow for any other alternative. And we pretty much had to put them through a psych evaluation. So imagine what we were finding at that time when you do that. We were finding people who had anxiety, depression, and other psychological conditions. So at the time, it was rather regimented in the sense that, okay, we must treat these parts, we must put you through a psych eval, we must write letters for you in order for you to eventually get hormones. And that could be anywhere from a 6 month to a year wait. And trying to find a physician or an endocrinologist was difficult. But again, the expectation was that you would show up dressed properly, regardless of how open you were, which in itself was a risk for people, right? Because that's a public setting. And thankfully things have changed over the years, because now there's been an explosion in the understanding of gender identity, right? We now have terms like non-binary. We did not at the time. You were either transitioning male or female, nothing in between. So now if someone walks into my office, there isn't the expectation that they need to come dressed. They may not eschew a feminine presentation or a male presentation per se. We don't hold them to X number of months of counseling before we can declare that they are, yes, appropriate for hormones, and we don't tell them who they are anymore. They come in and they tell us who they are. Probably a more important aspect is that we understand that people who are transitioning are suffering often from gender dysphoria. So, dysphoria is a state of mind that's depressed, that's distressed. And so that's where in the past we began to identify them as anxious, depressed. Now we say, well, of course you are, right? You're coming in at a point in your life which is tremendously difficult. You're stepping out from under the shadows into your identity, not necessarily passing yet because you haven't had the benefit of hormones. And it's been difficult living that alternative life that wasn't really you. So of course you're anxious, of course you're depressed. So we've shifted from pathologizing the person to saying, this all makes sense. Doesn't mean we don't treat that in terms of perhaps psychotropic medication, if appropriate. But what I have learned is the answer to gender dysphoria is transitioning. And transition may look varied according to the person. So people may pursue what we call a stealth approach, which is not telling anyone, but beginning that process of transformation slowly. Some may start hormones at a very low level for the psychological benefit rather than the transformative benefit. And we now have this term called non-binary, gender fluid, gender queer, in which it's understood that people don't necessarily embrace one gender or another, but they're somewhere in between, like the yin-yang. They're embracing both, but not necessarily at the same time or at differing times. So therefore the expectations have to change, which I think has created confusion in today's world, right? Because now, if we move from the past to the present, the level of education and awareness is much greater. But I argue that I don't think we have created a safe, welcoming space in society yet. Not in this state, right? I think a lot of you are aware of Governor Ducey's signing of a bill. And this bill provides for well, it requires school systems to restrict transgender athletes to participate in the sports of their natal birth, right? So if you have a transgender female athlete, she can't participate as a female. She has to participate as a male, and vice versa. No recognition of non-binary. You know, what's the rationale behind that? Best I can tell, the argument has been that if you have a transgender male athlete, for example, the argument is this person has benefited from the administration of testosterone, therefore unequal playing field. Or the reverse, right? JD, correct me if I'm wrong. So they're saying that someone who was born male already has enhanced muscle mass, transitions to female, and will automatically win over all other females. And you know, it's a reasonable question to ask, but the assumption isn't valid because you know, studies have been done over time to show that there's not a difference physically. So that's where that's coming from. And the other part of the bill was, which is more concerning to us, is that healthcare providers are now restricted from treating minors. And it doesn't mean they can't have therapy, it means they can't have hormone suppression. And here's another shift in the field. You know, in the past, children, no, we didn't deal with. And then we became much more open and aware that children can know. And so a shift in the field of treatment was that hormones, or puberty suppression, putting a pause button on puberty to prevent development of secondary sexual characteristics was greatly helpful. Imagine if you are, you know, a 13-year-old male who understands herself to be female, but if you don't stop puberty, what will happen? Voice will deepen, and that's irreversible. Hair growth, beard growth will also occur, and that is permanent. It can only be treated by months of electrolysis. And for the transgender female, or transgender male who is a natal female, the growth of breasts, right? So hormone suppression was an excellent avenue just to put the pause button on, allow the person to mature, and then circa age 18, have clarity on, yes, I do want to proceed. That's gone now. No healthcare provider can do this in the state of Arizona, and of course Florida, right? So it's a disturbing shift in the field because we know the suicide rate in this population is higher than the average, and now we've just opened the door to that remaining unchanged. So we've come a long way, but now we're caught up in the political divide of this country whereby legislation is being introduced. I expect the next step for Arizona will be bathroom law. So, bathroom law. So what do you do with that? You know, imagine if you are transitioning as female and you're dressing female, and by golly, you are recognized as female. But you're a natal male per birth certificate. You're going to be constrained to go into the male bathroom. How will that work out? What if you're non-binary? Yeah. So non-binary means, as I described earlier, you don't necessarily subscribe to being a one gender all the time. You may look androgynous, you know, in terms of how you present. What are you going to do? What if you don't look particularly female or particularly male? So that's coming down the pipes. Working in the field and working with clients, I get a lot of feedback of what happens in the community. So Sedona is a particularly, I think, welcoming community, but outside of Sedona, it's not the case. I've heard reports of store employees treating transgender people poorly. And that's more toward Prescott and moving out from Sedona. So one of the things I've decided to do is keep a list of these stores and write them a letter saying, you have been identified, as having I'll have to be careful how I word this, but I want to say transphobic, but of course I can't. That's another sign of the times, we can't say what it is, right? But you've been identified as not having a welcoming environment. So here's training if you want it, but here's your notice that it's being paid attention to. Okay, any questions? I'd like to turn it over to that instead at this point. We've gone from a very regimented, rigid idea of what gender identity is to now, we have no expectations, at least from the mental health field, in terms of welcome. Tell us who you are, tell us how we can help you. And as Carolyn and I were talking, one aspect of the transgender family member is the family is often under-acknowledged, meaning there's tremendous pressure on them to be, okay, yes, we're with you 100%, we're going to get the pronouns right. But it's a painful, difficult journey for family members. So that's been a shift as well, too, where we're trying to take the pressure off family members and allow them their own process. Because they've lived with this child for years. It's very difficult to shift view. And they're also a critical support as well, but they have their own process. So we've moved to treat the person, but also treat the person in context as well. But I am discouraged, to be honest, in terms of what's occurring on the larger social scene. Not good. And we've seen this before. We've seen waves of good legislation. We've seen election of transgender officials. But now we have this wave coming where it's almost as though there's a perceived threat that if we talk about gender identity in the classroom, somehow, I think everyone's familiar with this idea, you'll influence. Influence what? We know that this is inherent in the person. It wasn't acquired. It's how they were born. And it doesn't make any difference to anyone at any given point in time. It doesn't affect your life. But I think that's part of the backlash here, is that anytime there's promotion or you see a rising of status with an other group, there's a quick move to put them back in their place. So we'll see what happens. But at this point, I'm fairly discouraged, though I will say that, it comes as a wave, right? So when that wave elapses, we'll have rising up again. Any thoughts, questions? Yes?
It seems what's missing in our country, in so many ways, is education. It seems that years ago when I was in college, I might be wrong now, but my memory was that we learned in psychology that we are born with both within our systems. And that, I don't remember going into the balance or what you can do at that time, of course. But our education is only being hampered now by this resistance that we have to everything. But to be educated about this, it's a bit like, it's not a parallel, but, the DNA, people hate Germans or they hate Irish or they hate Italians, and then they have a DNA test and they find, lo and behold, they have some of those things. So, the education is so missing.
Well, it's why I asked, when did you learn about it? Because, even for me as a much younger, up-and-coming therapist, I learned about this outside of my profession. We weren't taught anything. How did I learn about it? Well, I saw the documentary, said, wow. And then I started going to support group meetings, right? Which they kindly let me in. So I learned on the ground And then I began teaching in a university gender and women's studies department, so, you know, that helped. But like, when did you learn? When did you hear about it? Because when you think back, you probably don't really know. You probably are more aware in the last decade or so. But, you know, it's been out there for at least 30 years, JJ?
More than that.
Yeah. And what happens if you try to educate? You get the backlash. Like, at what age do you start educating? Kindergarten up to grade 5? I don't think so. You know, but at some point, yes, because you have in the classroom students who are identifying as such. So you can't create an other unspoken, don't talk about. And yet, you know, how do we educate without incurring political backlash?
Well, some of these students are coming from families that have already transitioned, so
Yeah.
you know, they are more knowledgeable than some of the adults surrounding them.
Yeah, my concern is, you know, again, if society, I'm arguing, we lack that welcoming space where, you know, it doesn't matter if you passed or not. Who cares? Apparently we still do. So if society lacks that welcoming space, how on earth do we create it in the classroom? It's a good question. Kathy?
You made me think, Jen, so thank you, about when did I start becoming aware. And probably college was the first exposure, but when I started getting active in local politics back in New York, so like 1991 or so, I remember being part of trying to incorporate transgender into platform language for political organizations and get that recognized. So I've been working on these issues for 30 plus years. And I'm thinking in that 30 years, because you started by saying where we were and where we are, and in some ways, things have come so far as a society in terms of acceptance. Chris and I watch some of the TV shows that we watch on Hulu, and Hulu has started airing an ad that, I don't know if anybody's seen it, that it actually is from the parents' perspective of transgender kids, and about how they love their transgender kids and how they will defend, you know, them till, you know, to the end, you know, the extreme. And to see this, thinking that this is such a big leap now, because, you know, IKEA started it, 20 years ago, advertising to the LGB, no T at that time, community, right? And you know, so we've come so far, and now finally we're recognizing and putting, only when it's on TV and in commercials and in pop culture, you know, does acceptance really start happening to the point of it being something that's not thought of anymore or not defended against as something, right, once it's accepted in pop culture. So we've come so far, and when we come so far, there's always backlash.
Yeah.
And that's what we're experiencing now, is the backlash, because as awareness comes, it's something to be feared by those who want to resist. And I think that we wouldn't be where we are in terms of acceptance and have made those strides forward, and we'll take a step back, but we'll go forward again, and, you know, only increasingly. But it wouldn't happen without things like the Unitarians, you know, who are not a, quote, LGBTQ-focused organization, but have always been LGBTQ welcoming. And it's affirming that, welcoming, and I want to thank Carolyn so much for being on top of this fellowship to make sure that we stay accredited as a welcoming fellowship, because it's so important. I myself don't know that I could go somewhere that doesn't display that rainbow and doesn't say that it's welcoming. I mean, it might be, it might not. If you are, you need to be out and proud about it and put it out there so that people can find their way and so that we can know each other. And so that is how we take those steps forward. So it means everything to me that this fellowship is a welcoming community. And again, thank you, Carolyn, for being on top of that. Thank you, JJ, for being a groundbreaker early on. You know, thank you, Chris, for your leadership. Thank you, Jen, for being here. But thanks, really, it's to everybody who makes me feel welcome, makes us feel welcome as a couple, recognizes our marriage, you know. it's, again, we've come so far, but times are dangerous out there, even in welcoming liberal Sedona.
Well, as an outsider, because I'm originally from Canada, actually born and raised there, came here when I was 30. What concerns me is this is like a gun packing culture. And if you're familiar with your northern neighbors, we don't like guns. You got to declare them at the border, you can't have them. So that's an additional concern. But I think your answer, rather than education, I think media holds the answer here, okay? Because if we see more and more people who are not fitting into that gender box, it'll normalize our vision. The non-binary population is very important because they really goof with our ideas of gender, right? So that's where you'll see a young guy with a man bun, maybe he's wearing a kilt and he has his fingernails polished, yay, okay? They tend to be gender fluid, they tend to not conform to the gender role script. They're important. If we see them more and more in the culture, there we habituate our view. We start questioning gender. I used to ask my students, why is it when it's really hot outside in the summer, guys are wearing shorts past their knees and t-shirts, and you women, you're wearing skimpy tanks and your shorts are really short? And they'll say, well, but those are the clothes out there. Yeah, I know, but who decided biologically that you feel the heat more than guys? You need to therefore dress less. So, transgender community is important because they cause us to question these really dumb ideas we have about gender, right?
Great. Okay, I think we have time for one more.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, regarding the issue of trans kids in sports, are you saying that you don't think there are any valid reasons for example, the women's movement to be concerned that girls are not going to be fairly competing?
Well, I've done not an exhaustive look, but I've done a brief look because, it's been of interest to me. As a woman who was taking hormone therapy for menopause, I thought, okay, testosterone. Did nothing for me. But, thus far, there isn't evidence to say that the natal male who transitions to female has a physiological advantage over her female counterparts.
So from my research, I think there's, on both sides, evidence for your position. And I think that progressives are just as guilty as the right for ignoring the nuances, and it pushes people away.
No, you're right, you're right. I mean, it's a fair question to ask, and we shouldn't bristle at the question. I would prefer that schools take it on a case-by-case basis. So let's say you've had a natal male. When I say natal, that means, the person was born male, and let's say they were heavily into sports and weightlifting, and then at age 16 say, okay, I'm transitioning, I'm coming into my true identity as female. I'm going to be on the swim team or in wrestling. Do you think that person will have an advantage? Yeah. But that's not the case across the board. I had a person in this community, and it's not violating confidentiality because Red Rock News did an article on her. She was male, very talented swimmer. She was female, transitioned to male, but not till what age? 15-ish, 16? And the swim team said, yeah, come on over to the guys' side, And there was no issue in terms of advantage. In fact, one could argue maybe a bit of a disadvantage, right? I don't know.
Absolutely.
But in any case, I would prefer that, we not do a piece of legislation that just says everybody in the same basket, but allow the school some degree of decision-making so that we can be fair about about this and not do a black and white position.
Yeah, just real quick, it's not like there's all of these transgender athletes in high school.
The number's very low. Why are
These laws that are all over the country lately are just, they're a solution seeking a problem that doesn't exist. I mean, there's so very few. I think in Kentucky there was an example where this transgender girl was about 12 and she formed this hockey, what is it?
Soccer. Was it soccer?
It was field hockey.
Field hockey.
And she created this team at the school, and then the state passed this law that wouldn't even allow her to play on the team that she created. And there's very few of these kids in these states that these laws are even applying to. It's just a political ploy by the right to get their base really jacked up that this is happening all over the country with all these trans athletes, and it's really disgusting. And it's extremely dangerous.
Well, we haven't asked the question how many actually are out there. And including the youngsters who are, thinking that they're transgender. How many of those are in this country that are seeking hormone suppression? I think the number's pretty low.
Right. I was going to ask that question. What is the percentage of people that are
non-binary? Yeah, it's hard to capture because, who's the reporting body, right? So it can only be an estimate at best. And a lot of people are not willing to come out and say, me. So no one asks me for numbers. So I'm assuming physicians' offices, maybe. The epidemiology, I have no idea how they track it.
Have you ever heard an estimate?
Sorry?
Have you ever heard an estimate?
No. I've not heard one that I consider credible. So.
That was wonderful.
Thank you.
Okay, so now we're going to go into a shared moment of silence. So I just invite you to just take a breath and relax. And I will bring the gong when the moment of silence is done. So here are our offertory words for today. We give to remind ourselves how many gifts we have to offer. We give to remember that we are part of something bigger than ourselves. We give because we believe in music and sacred space. We give with the faith that together we have enough. And now we'll have our offertory song. Okay, now is the time for joys and concerns, and I think I need to turn this up. Joys and concerns. Thank you, Penny, for doing the stones. So if you would just raise your hand, please don't touch the mic. I know it's hard, but try not to. And keep your mask on. So if somebody wants to start. Yes.
Many of you know Pat Corrington, who hurt her back a few months ago or so. She fell and injured some vertebra. And a couple weeks ago or so, they had to bring her husband to the ER and discovered that he had stage 4, I believe it was prostate cancer. And I got a message from our University Women president yesterday that he passed away on Friday. So please keep her, his family, and everyone in the family in your thoughts.
Buzz Corey.
Oh no.
Sandy, do you want to come up?
Well, it's not with regard to our discussion today, and there's so many people who are doing such good works locally, but I tend to hear things, as we all do, on the news, and then I respond to them. And this sort of really touched me in the sense that Texas is trying to put a Hispanic woman to death for something that wasn't even proven. You know, child was fell downstairs, died with no evidence,
they're putting her, and she's the first Hispanic woman being put to death in Texas. And it just makes you feel, there's plenty of it around, that the people who are escaping their countries are coming here to a situation that is mirroring where they left. So you may or may not want to look it up. I tend to ring the various people up when I hear these things, and I'm really moved by it. But another sadness in our country.
I just want to let you know that our Dieter Knecht is not feeling well. He had some heart trouble over the last weeks. And I think they're down in Phoenix at the hospital having everything checked out. So please keep him in your hearts and minds and send him wishes for speedy recovery and healing. And also I want to thank all of you for being here and being open to all kinds of issues that we're discussing here, and for asking honest questions, and for supporting programs like Widening the Circle, where we look at all kinds of social issues or horrible things that happened in this country's past that need to be looked at so we can learn from it and see and better understand what's happening now. So thank you all so much for having an open mind, and I think once we understand things, we are less afraid of them. And thank you, JJ, for sharing stories, because that's how we can connect and learn and understand. Thank you.
Peter. Thank you. Peter. Thank you. I really appreciate today's service, and thank you, Carolyn, Jan, for arranging this for us. I want to end with, I think, a joy, because it brought back some memories. Many of you know that Ron and I had many, many years at the University of Minnesota. And it's always been known as one of the top 2 or 3 in the country open to now LGBTQ. Way back in our day, it was mostly about gays and lesbians. Some other things weren't talked about that much. But Ron and I had a great joy, and this brought back memories. Ron was the director of one of the large student unions at the University of Minnesota for quite a number of years. And his professional organization, ACLU, I believe if I get it right, Association of College Unions International. They had a super active gay, lesbian, now they would say LGBTQ group, and wonderful folks who were colleagues. I always went to the conferences with Ron because it was such a great group of people. We were named the honorary members of the LGBT, whatever it was called at the time, because we always joined that group for dinners and parties and get-togethers, and many, many great memories about that time. So we were trying to remember, when did we, way back when, start to learn about things that I would never have heard of in rural Iowa, where I grew up. So it brought back a lot of good memories, and thank you so much for today.
Now, I have a joy, and that is that my brother Andrew, sitting in the back there, has finally been able to come from England for a visit.
I have a joy for my brother today too, who lives back in New Jersey. This may sound strange to you, but I am celebrating along with him his confirmation into the Catholic Church at age 76. I know he's been attending Mass with his wife of 50 years, and I think now he feels really at home and at peace about his religious choice, and I rejoice with him.
Okay, so I had a joy, and it's because JJ, you recommended the film, well, documentary Disclosure. And the people who watched it and discussed it really had their eyes opened up. It was so educational. Thank you. You are a great resource to this congregation. I'm so glad you could make it today. And if you haven't seen Disclosure, you can see it on Netflix. It is totally worthwhile if you want to continue getting educated about the trans. Well, they're Hollywood.
Yeah.
Trans Hollywood, but very, very informative. Is there anyone else? Okay, then we'll drop the last stone for those joys and concerns that haven't been voiced today, and keep them in your heart. Thank you, Kim.
We are building a new way. We are building a new way. We are building a new way, feeling stronger every day. We are building a new way. We can feed our every need. Every need. We can feed our every need. Every need. We can feed our every need. Start with love, that is the seed. We can feed our every need. Peace and freedom is our cry. Peace and freedom is our cry. Peace and freedom is our cry. Without these, our world will die. Peace and freedom is our cry. We are building a new way. We are building a new way. We are building a new way, feeling stronger every day. We are building a new way. A new way, a new way, a new
Okay, so as we close, once again, we are gathered here in community, and I hope that you leave feeling uplifted. And a reminder that's in our order of service, each of us is meant to have a character all our own, to be what no other can exactly be, and do what no other can exactly do. So go forth and be yourself. I couldn't do this without your smiling, wonderful face.